Okay. Well, Kaylee, Angelina was kind enough to share a little bit about herself. Could you tell us about yourself?
Sure. I'm originally from Tucson, Arizona, where I started my A&P career. I wanted to fly in the Air Force originally, and my uncle was a recruiter, and he told me I was a little too sick to do it. So I didn't know what I was going to do with my life if I couldn't fly these aircraft. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know that there was a general aviation kind of area that you could go to as a civilian. So one of the ladies I played hockey with back there, she said that she was an A&P and she could get me a tour of the community college, and I completely fell in love. So I went to my A&P school. I graduated and I worked in Tucson for about 2 years, and then I moved to New York and worked as a UH-60 mechanic for about 2 years. And then I moved to the DC area and I'm working on CRJ-200s currently.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Well, we will go ahead and open up the chat. Folks, if you are going to put anything in the chat, please make sure that it goes to everyone so that we can get visibility on any of your questions. And we can pick the brain of Kaylee and Angelina about life in aviation. So I will start with my favorite question, which is what do you think is the prettiest aircraft ever built? Kaylee, do you have an opinion on this one?
Oh, I don't know. There's so many. I like the A10s, honestly. I've always been a big A10 person.
Solid answer. Angelina, how about you? Prettiest aircraft ever built?
I really like the Stearman. I think those guys are really cool. But I really love experimental aircraft because I think it's fun that they're all going to be different, and how the designers choose to ultimately make them is what I think is really awesome.
Yeah, those Stairmans are absolutely gorgeous, and those the kind of planes they come up with for an EAA and stuff like that is just like, wow, how did you dream this up? So Angelina, how did you choose to emphasize flight over maintenance? Is there a over under there, or do you have a particular preference on which one you want to prioritize and why?
Yeah, so I have passions for both, and I ultimately saw doing my A&P and flight as ways to ultimately make enough money. So throughout my time at university, becoming a flight instructor allowed me to earn hours, but also have a living on the side and ultimately help pay for my A&P. And now that I'm out, now I'm able to potentially use A&P work to help me get some entry level flight jobs as needed. Um, and then it kind of just like intermixes. So different points, I feel like I emphasize it more. But I really love flying. That's ultimately, I think, my main passion. But obviously, everyone here loves maintenance, and we all have a love for how aircraft work. So yeah, it's kind of hard to say what one is like a little bit more important. But currently pursuing more of a work as a pilot at this point. But I want to keep both in my peripherals.
Very cool. Kaylee, any dreams of doing the private pilot route? You had mentioned that you were thinking of flying for the Air Force. I know I can't pass a medical, so I will never be in the
Same.
skies with Angelina. But what's it? You kind of need a driver's license for just ultralight stuff. Any plans to take the wheels off the ground?
I have 1 hour of flight instruction, and my mom got me an hour, excuse me, an hour for Christmas a couple of years ago, and I did really love it. So, I mean, maybe if I have enough money later on, I will continue my pilot's license, but we'll see.
Well, that's awesome. So, in AWAM, of course, our scholarship program is focused on our technicians and their career path in the maintenance side. But thankfully, with WAI, they have many, many scholarships out there for flight if any of the techs on are interested in lifting wheels up off the ground. I believe the WAI scholarship program starts here in just a couple months.
Oh, perfect.
All right, Kaylee. So you've likely encountered situations where you were overlooked because of your gender. Like, can you go fetch the mechanic for me, or maintenance
Oh
control
my
calling and
gosh.
you pick up the phone and it's like, hey, can you go find a
Yeah.
mechanic? Because, clearly we have secretaries in our line maintenance operation.
Oh yeah.
So we have someone wondering, how have you handled that?
I mean, I've been pretty fortunate that the guys that I do work with, they've always been very good to me. They've always really helped me kind of, excuse me, they've helped me kind of push myself along, and they've never been the, oh, can you go do this? I've had a couple of those people, and the guys that I was working with on that crew, they were always very good to kind of just help me along and just tell them to ignore the other guys that are doing that kind of stuff to you. So I really haven't dealt too much with it. You just kind of roll your eyes and continue on, I think.
And how long have you been working in the field, Kaylee? How many years?
Um, I graduated A&P school December of 2016, and I started in March of 17.
Oh, fantastic. Angelina, what about you? Have you ever felt sidelined or overlooked when you were in school or working in your internship?
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing there is letting your work kind of speak for itself. And initially, when I was in A&P school and really starting any internship, whether it was on the flight or the maintenance side, I think unfortunately, being a woman, almost any of these fields, people are going to kind of have biases initially. And so I found that if you just are firm in what you do and you have your own self-confidence and you have the ability to get to know the people around you, right? Because it's like they might have those biases, but how can you make friends and get to know them so that way they can, okay, really know, understand you, and then they won't carry that on to someone else. And then it's like if you can kind of pick who your teams are, that's nice in school, and then you can just like not pick the people that are going to discount you, right? Obviously, in work settings, that's not usually an option. But going back to just focusing on your work, being a good person and not worrying about them, they ultimately will come around, at least in my experience. But I know that doesn't happen with everybody.
Focus on your work, be a good person. That is some sage advice, Angelina. That's we hear a lot about the biases and the challenges that we face as women in the industry and the kind of known factor of we have to be twice as good to get half as much credit.
Yeah.
But do no harm, but take no bull either.
Yep. Exactly.
I think that's a core tenet that everyone can kind of agree on. So when you think of aviation maintenance, what was the driving factor, Kaylee? Why, when you chose maintenance as an alternative career path, did you think you were going to fall in love with it, or were you kind of just looking for a way to be around airplanes?
Um, I don't think I thought I was going to fall in love with it. I've always been kind of a go get dirty kind of person. My dad his hobby was fixing cars. So I'd help him every once in a while. And I liked the thrill of getting dirty, but I didn't think that I was going to fall in love with being a full-time mechanic. I thought it was going to be like a cool, oh, this is awesome. You can go tell people you have this cool career. But once I actually got into it, I was like, oh my God, this is fantastic. I love this. And it just kind of grew every day for me.
That is true. The surprising aspect of, oh, this is a great way to pay my rent, and then all of a sudden you realize, like, oh, this is actually something that I'm really, really passionate about. And you mentioned it's a cool thing to tell people that you do. So, Angelina, when you tell people that you're a commercial pilot and an aircraft mechanic, what's the reaction to that?
Yeah, I try not to do it for ego because that's not why I do it. But like, it is kind of fun when you talk to someone that does have biases against you and they ask who you are. And then they're like, oh, you're not just like 12. And it's like, no, I'm not. And I do this. So like, it is fun. And again, starting that conversation with strangers. I was in Germany once and I was speaking with a man on the street in German. And I'm, for all practical purposes, really close to being fluent. And when I told him that I'm a pilot and mechanic, he thought that there was like an error in like my translation. So he's like, "Do you mean like flight attendant?" And I was like, "No, I mean pilot and mechanic." And like his eyes just got so big, and he was just like so proud, and he didn't even know that was like a thing, which I've had happen in the US too. But like, yeah, so that's just a cool example.
Oh, what a fun moment. Are you sure you're speaking my language correctly when you say pilot and mechanic?
And like
Is
the
this
words are pretty different too. So, but yeah.
That's great. What would you say? Let's see. What do you like best about being a woman working in aviation maintenance, and what do you like least? Angelina?
Definitely pushing down those boundaries. The fact that we've had so many women before us allow us to be here and do what, go to school and do this. Like I think about being the only female in most of my classes, but knowing that, my favorite professor, she was the only female in the whole program. And a lot of my mentors can say the same thing. So being able to be here now with having 5 of my peers that were females, that's an improvement and that's exciting. And then the least is it's a kind of a double-edged sword, right? Like it kind of stinks sometimes to look around and see how much more work ultimately I want to do to make more young girls believe that they can do things, not just because of their gender, but because they have a passion for it. So sometimes it kind of makes me sad, but it also gives me passion. So it's a good thing.
Absolutely. Kaylee, what about you? Best and worst?
Um, I agree with it's awesome that um, we can be here to try and encourage more young women to get into the field. And I love that I am, it's good and bad to be the only female on your team. At least at my company right now, our location, I'm the only female. And it's awesome to be like, go out and show these guys that women sometimes are better mechanics than most of the guys out there. And it's awesome that I can go down there and just knock all these guys out of the park. But it's also pretty terrible to be the only woman because they do kind of look at you like, oh, you're frail, you can't do all of this. I know Bill can help me explain that these guys, they're like, oh no, we got this. You just go sit in the car. You go sit in the air conditioning, go sit down. Like, I took the same amount of schooling that you did. I can do just as much, if not more, than most of you. So it's very frustrating, and I know that a lot of girls will be discouraged that there are guys that are going to tell them that no, you can't do this, you're not good enough. But it's nice to be able to show them that you are good enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Proving that point. It's such a fun point to prove, when you just knock it out of the park, like you said, on something, especially something somebody's been troubleshooting for like 2 days and the aircraft's down, and then you're just like, did you turn it on? You have those moments of just, hey, I belong here just as much as you do. Do you feel like that's created a little bit of a chip on your shoulder?
For me, a little bit. I do get kind of frustrated, and I don't tend to trust people as much as I think I should be able to, and it's hard.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. I like to say that when I started in the industry, I didn't start with a chip on my shoulder. I started with a boulder, and I've managed to knock it down to just a chip at this point. When we were working with the Women in Aviation Advisory Board, we did a lot of work to identify the barriers that women face across aviation. And of course, in my realm, especially in maintenance, looking at why we have such a narrow pipeline coming into the industry, but such an exodus of certificated mechanics once they do come in. Angelina, from a kind of a holistically aviation standpoint, what do you feel are some of the biggest barriers that women face in aviation overall? And do you have any thoughts on how best to overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, like obviously this is a very holistic, and there's a lot of things that play a role into it. But I think from my experiences, a lot of the women, it's finding the right job for you that will allow you to ultimately have the life that you want and to do the work that you want to do. And so sometimes the work that you do, you could get paid another job that you might do less work for, but you get paid more, whether that's going into administration within aviation and being more on like the manager side, or potentially just shifting careers. Like I've met several women and men that are A&Ps and get into the field, but then they find that they can apply their certificates and their skills to auto or different facets of different industries that are still really similar. But at the end of the day, they might have a better work-life balance and ultimately get paid more. So that is one thing that I didn't really think about when I first got into aviation. And now I see that as one of the things that once you're in the industry, not necessarily a barrier to get into it, but a barrier to stay, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a fantastic point. Work-life balance is a major issue, and one of the things that we addressed in the recommendations to the FAA and Congress about quality of life in our industry. Kaylee, what are some of the challenges you faced with trying to navigate that?
I agree with the balancing, and then it's you're pushing your body to the limits too. So I think a big barrier is you've kind of pushed yourself to the limits, but our industry is so small and we're losing so many people and we can't keep enough people. You're pushing yourself further and further and further to where your body just can't handle it anymore. And it takes a toll mentally and physically as well.
You know, you're completely right there. I actually had to take medical leave earlier this year from the industry. You know, it was not something that I ever expected or prepared for. And, you know, it certainly happened at a time where I was younger than I thought I'd be, although I'm a little older than I wish I was. So you really have to take care of yourself in this industry. And sometimes that does mean, unfortunately, looking into alternative career paths like Angelina was speaking to. We see a lot of women go into quality control. We see them go into leadership roles. And, you know, interestingly, sometimes those are easier roles to navigate while still ending up in a position with more responsibility. So that's a very, very good point. So we have another question. Is the A&P useful internationally? Angelina, in your time in Germany, did you meet any A&Ps, or tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I wasn't able to spend time with any AMPs while I was there. In my last trip before, and then before COVID, that was kind of when I was first getting into the industry. But I do know, so we have the FAA here in America, and then they operate off of something called EASA in Europe, and then there's different forms of that in different countries. So a lot of people on the pilot side come to the US to ultimately get training and then go home to their countries and just get the equivalency type of a deal or any extra training that they need. So I know that's really common on the flight side. And to my knowledge, I also have, at least from my university, we had a lot of students come from Saudi Arabia to get their training through the FAA and then to be able to go home because, again, the standards here are fairly high. So translating that to another country often is fairly easy if you're coming from the US, at least from my understanding. So yeah.
Kaylee, have you ever had a chance to go TDY? Have you done any international work?
The only TDY I've done, I went to Syracuse, so I mean, it's not real international. But I do work with a lot of guys from Ethiopia. They have a pretty good school up there. They said it's very close to the FAA type of training that we do get. So they get all of their training over in Ethiopia, and then they come down to the US and they have enough of their hours and their studies that they can go and they can take the O's and P's and they get all their stuff through there. But I've never had any experience from going from the US over anywhere else.
Well, I have to say, as I'm a little ashamed to admit that although I've been working in aviation for a little over a decade now, I actually do not hold a passport, so I haven't been out of the US. But I know that when it comes to EASA, they have the B1, B2, there's the Japanese Aviation Authority, the Canadian Aviation Authority. Everybody kind of has different licensing structures, and that can create some paperwork kerfluffles. But if you're working for an American air carrier, something like, United Airlines that flies all around the world, there's definitely A&P positions overseas. Brenna, if you are interested in that and you're pursuing a career in maintenance, Hawaiian Airlines especially hires a lot of A&Ps in the Pacific region. They're based out of Hawaii and do a lot of international stuff. So there's definitely international opportunities with an A&P, but once you start talking about cross licensing, you do end up with a lot of paperwork. All right, what is the best advice we can offer to women just beginning their AMT program? We've got Todd from Iowa Western. They have 8 women out of 32 beginning the program this fall. That's an incredible number. That's super, super exciting to see. So Kaylee, what would you tell your younger self when you first walked in the door of UDC? Oh, you didn't go to UDC. I'm so sorry. I'm so used to Bill's network. But what would you tell yourself when you first started?
Just don't let them walk all over you. Stay strong. Don't let yourself become a doormat, because as soon as they find out that you have a weak spot, they're going to try to just kind of walk all over you. Just be who you are, stay strong, and know that you're a good mechanic. You can think that you're the worst mechanic on the planet, but in reality, you're probably a fantastic mechanic. I know a lot of the guys I work with, they tell me, you're actually fantastic. You're one of the better ones we have, but I don't feel like I am. Bill was constantly telling me, you're an amazing mechanic, and you just have to know that you're better than you are, and don't let anyone tell you that you're not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I struggled with that too. I started A&P school and I didn't know anything about fixing anything. I fiddled with my cousin's car about a total of 3 times when I decided, oh yeah, let's be a mechanic for a career. Angelina, especially coming out of school for the past few years, what would you say if you could go back and tell yourself when you first walked in the door to A&P school?
Yeah, so for myself, kind of like what you were saying, Kaylee, with the believing in yourself, right? Because if you can trust your own skills, even if you've never worked on anything before, right? Like a lot of my male peers, they had never worked on things either. Like we were in it together, but like we didn't really know that, because at first, like my own like fear was kind of there that it was just me. So realizing that was super helpful. But more so advice for the instructors. I had so many amazing professors that encouraged me by just being kind and letting me know that if I ever had any questions or I wanted extra assistance with projects, that they were there. And I also had some that didn't realize it, but they had their own biases and would make, I'm going to say, like basically just like jokes, like in class, like in lectures and stuff, that didn't necessarily need to be made. Like they could have made the points without bringing gender and stuff into it. And so as a professor, just being aware of how much influence you have over the classroom, because you set the tone for everybody else. So I had a lot of amazing professors, but for the few that weren't amazing, those classes definitely were more difficult to get through, because the tone for the class was different because of how they said it. So I think that's also very important.
I completely agree. I know I met my first male ally when I was in school, and that did a lot to get me through school. And that, unfortunately or fortunately, it really depends on the instructor and the program director, and sometimes the school itself. How are we addressing the fact that, not only do we have a female student in our program, but we may only have one. And that can create some really interesting environments. I know I was the only girl in my A&P school. And again, seeing that Todd has this group of 8, and the fact that they won't be facing that is proof that things really are changing, and changing for the better. And I see we have the wonderful Renee Bengelsdorf here, and she has a question of, why do male mechanics look at female pilots like they have lettuce in their teeth? Can either of you speak to quite what it is that is so disconcerting to a male technician when a female pilot brings their aircraft in?
That one's just funny. Like straight up, like if you're not a pilot, like what do you have to stand on? Like not that like as a mechanic that you might be a pilot, but like if you're not one, like I've had a lot of male A&P friends that aren't pilots and have like never flown a plane and like just think that it's so like no matter if you're a male or a female, flying a plane requires a lot of skill and the amount of training it takes to be a mechanic. One could say that there's more to be a pilot. And coming from a side of both, you use different sides of your brain and then you use all of it at the same time for both areas. So like just having respect for, you know, for your mechanic and for your pilot is so important. And when it comes from like a mechanic looking at like a female pilot, like I've had that happen. Like I just have to yell at my friends. Like it's again, if you're not in a place that you have, you know, more knowledge and experience than them, they're a pilot, they're qualified, right? So like I don't even entertain it because that just kind of drives me crazy. So yeah.
All right, well, let's flip this one on its head. Kaylee, I'm sure you have a story of walking up onto a flight deck right there on the line in DC with a male captain. Like, who is this technician? You got something you can share about that?
It's not a who is this technician? It's a oh, okay, cool, hi, and then go and turn to my male counterpart. As I have the logbook in my hands, I am filling out your logbook, and you're gonna go and talk to somebody else who hasn't been on the plane yet. I've been here, but my partner is just walking back up. He goes and talks to my partner as if my partner knows what's happening. And it's so infuriating that I actually made a whole bunch of buttons to put on my name tag or on my laminate that has MXT on it or MTX because I'm so sick of these pilots just being like, oh yeah, you don't matter, you're not a mechanic. That like I have to have, I actually do have some right here.
Yes, show us.
It's a little wrench because I'm so sick of it. It's every day I deal with this. And I just, we have just the same amount of skill that all these guys have. I don't understand. But it's also the same as pilots. We've gone through the same amount of school. We've done the same amount of work. I don't understand why it's so hard for these guys to believe that we are just as qualified.
Yep. And I'll toss in my favorite. I was working on contract for a cargo carrier. This was back when I was at FEAM, Kaylee, just like you're working with now. And I was filling out a logbook. I was signing the airworthiness release for this aircraft. And the captain turns around and he looks at me and he goes, "Are you an A&P?" And I'm just standing there and I'm holding his logbook and I stop my pen and I look at him like, "Are you not aware of like what qualifies me to be holding your logbook right now? I'm a little confused." And I said, "Yes, I sure am an A&P." And he goes, "Oh, good for you, sweetie."
Ugh.
Oh, you know, there are some moments that strain the standards of professionalism. But let's see. On the point of schooling, what study tips do you have for getting and retaining your A&P knowledge? Angelina, what was your favorite study practice?
It wasn't my favorite because like it's not enjoyable. So I'll just like preface that. So like we take a lot of tests that are very similar to how the FAA writtens are for the A&P, right? For all three of the tests. So I've learned the hard way how not to do it. That by this, like I think it was like my 8th FAA test or something like that. That I kind of have now a process that I go through. Like I said, it's not enjoyable, but like giving yourself a deadline. First of all, realizing that it's not going to be fun, but like don't get lazy. Don't keep your phone by you. Like I had to focus. I studied for all the tests in like a month and a half, And I did like 4 hours a day in addition to doing like, my class and my full job and everything. So like I was tired, but like that amount of focus was insane. And if you have more time, beautiful. But if you don't, it's possible. You just have to try really hard to like just focus. Don't give up. And then like the questions that are getting you, keep coming back to them. Make sure you understand it before you move on, because the FA is changing their questions. So you can't just like memorize the answers and go on. So again, no part of that was my favorite, but once you get through it, it's a good feeling.
What about you, Kaylee? Any study tips that you found were helpful when you were working towards your A&P?
So at least for my portion of the test, we did everything had been the same for a while. So I made flashcards, and it's kind of the same as Angelina. You go through, you learn what you can learn, and then whatever you can't figure out, you just set aside. And then once you get through all of the stuff that you do have down, come back to that stuff that you can't get down and just keep memorizing and then trying to understand as best as you can. And then once you do go back and look at it in the book and give yourself another little area to read through to kind of help you even better. I like to look at the diagrams as much as possible, but the flashcards definitely help me the most.
Absolutely. Yeah, with the new Part 147 coming out, a lot of things in A&P training are changing. And Angelina, you're absolutely right. Questions are being updated. The regulations have been updated. It is a whole new world for Part 147 schools now. So as students are in them and transitioning, as the industry is also transitioning, I've got to say, being dedicated to really understanding the subject matter that you are learning and making sure that you comprehensively understand instead of just have the ability to parrot back answers to questions. The Diamond certification standards are going to be a big deal in maintenance. And, the great side is that it's going to finally do more to actually prepare students for what life is like in the aviation industry and the type of work that we're going to be doing. So once a student graduates and gets their A&P, we have a question that someone is starting their first job in a couple of weeks. What advice would you give to her, Kaylee? Fresh out of school, newly minted, walking into their very first aviation job.
Just don't let them intimidate you. Just know you're a strong person. You got as far as you did because you worked for it. Just know that you don't have to roll over and let them do everything for you. Don't let them carry your tool bag. That drives me nuts. Like you worked hard for this. Just don't sell yourself short.
Absolutely. Never sell yourself short. Otherwise, you'll never be able to buy it back.
Yep.
Angelina, what about you?
So I haven't started my first A&P job yet, so I guess this will be my advice to like my future self, hopefully very soon. But just like something my mom always said is just like keeping your shoulders back and your head high, and just doing your best and just try to be kind, and hopefully it will all work out, right? That's kind of the goal at the end of the day.
Well, be a good person and have some optimism. That's a big part of it. I know that if I could go and talk to myself walking in the doors in the hangar in Mobile many years ago, I would probably tell myself that I have a right to the space that I take up, and not just at work, but as a person in general. Own the space that you're in, because it's yours, and you just don't let anyone take that away from you. I know that I made some pretty major missteps in my first A&P job, because I didn't really know what the expectation was of me, and I didn't really know what I was doing, and there wasn't anybody very keen on giving me any answers. So Kaylee, have you had any missteps that, something that you kind of look back on and go, oh, I would guide someone away from that particular pitfall?
I would just say I know never really been super confident in myself, and I've definitely had a lot of help lately of just kind of bringing myself back into it. Just stay true to who you are. I know everything that I was doing to what I thought was best, but I'd always go back home and just sit there and ponder on it. Did I actually do what was right? Am I doing the right thing? Am I actually doing anything right while I'm here? But yes, I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to. I'm following the manual, but I'm still always very nervous about it. But
Absolutely. Angelina, did you stick your foot in any piles when you were in school, or is there anything in particular you're worried about as you enter into the next phase of your career?
Trying to think in regards of like, really big mistakes, really nothing crazy. I think one of the things that I like kind of forced myself to do was when we had new females in our A&P program. Like, I like people, I like to be social, but people can be scary, right? So like, I didn't want to talk to really anyone. Like, I was happy working on the engines, so that was a safe place. But I kind of encouraged myself to just welcome them and just try to be a friend. And I remember that was something that I almost like didn't do, and then they ended up becoming some of my best friends. And like the guys in my program too, like I remember thinking, I'll just kind of hang out over here, and like I've got a few people that I can talk to. But I tried really hard just to get myself to just try to open up and to get to know them. And same deal, really good guys, and I'm really glad that I did that. So I hope that I'll continue to do that, and to remember that, again, there's people out there that you're going to be glad that you got to know. So keep pushing yourself.
That's an incredible point when you start talking about building relationships and networking and things like that. I know that if I hadn't have ended up a part of AWAM, I would have left this industry. I actually did leave aviation maintenance. I was done. I was not going to do it anymore. I didn't think it was for me. And that was right around the time that I encountered AWAM. Angelina, I know you've been with us for quite some time. Would you like to speak a little bit about how AWAM's impacted you?
Oh yeah, I mean, you guys are amazing, because I met you guys at, I think it was Reno, when I was still in high school and when I was like determining exactly where I was going to go. And I knew I wanted to go into A&P, but I wasn't really sure that I could do it, or that there would be opportunities for me, or what that would look like. And I just remember like meeting all you guys at that breakfast, and just the encouragement and knowing that you guys made it happen for you, and that it's okay if I'm the only one in my classroom, because there's so many other ones out there over the country. So that was just a huge source of encouragement. And then when I got to my college, we didn't have a chapter. And so I decided to found one, because that encouragement, unless you can go to a conference, it's like, where do you get that feeling besides, just a stranger that comes up to you and tries to tell you that they're glad that you're here. And what was really cool was my second year at college, I was able to get all the girls to attend the conference, and they got to see that for themselves, which again, it's kind of hard to explain to people, but once you can be there, like you can build these connections. You can build your roots better and know that you are important and that you can go through this field. And again, even if you're the only one, you're not alone, because we got your back. So AWAM has been very instrumental in me finishing my A&P and sticking to it, and ultimately trying to help others. So yeah, I'm very glad that you guys exist.
I'm very glad that AWAM exists too. It's definitely made a big impact in my life, personally and professionally. And Kaylee kind of got roped in a little bit. We we have some wonderful male allies within our organization as well. And it can be very easily said that if a woman and a man stands in the same room and says the same thing to a group of men, it's going to be the men that the men listen to, and that they hear, and that they accept as a source of information and insight. And so male allies are of critical importance in our career field. Kaylee, do you want to speak a little bit on what male allyship has done for you and how it's impacted your career?
I mean, if I didn't have the good fortune of the guys that I originally worked with beginning my career, um, I worked with a lot of older guys that they were kind of the crusty, salty, nothing is good, nothing is right in this world. So I thought for sure these guys were gonna tear me apart. They were gonna eat me alive, rip me down. But they were the ones that helped build me up. They taught me kind of the rule of the land. They taught me all of the new things that I needed to be learning that school didn't teach me. And they slowly kind of taught me to stand up for myself, and they introduced me to all of these other people. And then once I got to DC, I had very good fortune to work with Bill, and he introduced me to AWAM. I had no idea what AWAM was, and he kind of started teaching me about everything, and he gave me all the spiel, and then I met Stacy, and I've had such good fortune. She is an amazing person, and she showed me that there is this whole new world that you can kind of open yourself up to, and it's eye-opening. You have no idea what good connections you can make, and I'm really thankful for AWAM for sure.
Well, Kaylee, we're so happy to have you here and have you involved. We're starting to run a little shy on time, so I want to make sure that we've captured any questions that anybody has left in the chat. And let's see, what are your career aspirations and where would you like to be in 10 years? Angelina, you're just stepping your foot out into the world. What's the next decade hold for you, girl?
So that's something that I've been thinking a lot lately, and it's a little bit daunting because I feel like what I want to do keeps changing throughout, just like my journey in aviation so far. So to say that I have a 10-year goal, it's going to probably be different than what I think it is now. So I'm kind of going into that knowing that my future is probably going to be much different than what I'm actually thinking. But one day I would really love to own some sort of my own business where I can have some sort of a flying operation and do maintenance on the side. And one day in my dream of dreams, I would love just to have a cabin and a dog and be able to fly on a grass strip. And somehow if I can do all of that, that would be amazing. So I'm trying to figure out what companies I can work for now to build the experience that will allow me to do that. So we're figuring it out, but yeah.
Well, hey, with that seaplane rating, you're not going to have a grass strip. You could go for a lake too, grab you an old CB and take that for your commute.
Yeah.
Kaylee, what about you? What does the next decade look like in your brain?
Well, honestly, I have no idea. When I first started my career, all of my instructors were all fixed wing. So of course, everything was about the fixed wing, and they scared me out of helicopters. So I was absolutely terrified. When we moved to New York, we were very much in a cow town. There was an airport maybe an hour and a half away, and then an army base. So it was like, there's nothing here for me. I don't know what I'm gonna do. One of our friends was he was a pilot. He's like, hey, we've got a contract opening up, but it's for helicopters. I know you kind of been scared to do that. Would you be interested? Man, I don't know what else I'm gonna do. So yeah, I'm gonna have to take it. And I dreaded the day. And when I ended up there, I completely fell in love. So I think I'd really like to end back up with helicopters at some point. I'm not sure where I'm gonna be in 10 years, but if I could go back with helicopters, that's kind of where I'd like to go.
You know, every helicopter mechanic that I've met, they preach the positives of the rotor wing. I've never had the privilege of working on a helicopter, but it's definitely something that if it comes across my way, I think I'd have to give it a try. It seems like something people are very passionate about. Angelina, Todd is interested in starting a chapter at his college. Can you tell him just a little bit about what that process was like for you starting an AWAM chapter?
Yeah, so each university does it different. The way that I chose to do it with my peers and with my university was to create ultimately like a student organization, because that would allow us to have access to different resources that my university provided. You can just do a chapter, just a standard one outside, like, affiliated with the town, not necessarily with the university. But if you choose to do it with the student groups, it might be very advantageous. So definitely choose which route you want to go from there. And then in either sense, you're going to want some sort of a faculty lead or just someone that can be a mentor, even if it's not necessarily faculty. So for me, it was getting enough students to sign a petition that said that they wanted to go forward with the chapter, and then figuring out, okay, who can kind of be my point person. And it was a lot of me just sending emails to Angel and just figuring out at the time what we needed to do, and creating a logo and all that fun stuff. But honestly, it kind of came together pretty quickly once we had some of those things down.
Yeah, so Angelina mentioned Angel. Angel Green is our chapter chair. She is the primary point of contact if you're interested in starting a chapter with AWAM. For a college institution, we do require that there is a faculty member who is part of the chapter as a facilitator, because obviously as students graduate and move on, we want to make sure that the chapter remains in place at the university. But starting an AWAM chapter anywhere is very easy. It only takes 3 people. You need a president, a vice president, and a secretary treasurer, which is a position that can be combined. And looks like Bill sent you the link to our website on starting a chapter. And I will toss Angel's email into the chat. Oops, looks like I wasn't actually typing. Well, let's see. I also cannot type and talk at the same time, or I will type what I am speaking or speak what I am typing. So ladies, thank you so much for joining us today. Do you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to leave us with?
Go ahead, Angelina.
Don't all rush at once. Angelina, go ahead.
Just that I'm happy that we were able to spend this time together tonight, and I look forward to the future Zoom calls. So yeah.
Kaylee?
Yeah, I'm very thankful that we have opportunities like this to be out there, to show our voices and to hear from other people, and to hopefully help encourage other women to get into the field. And I really do look forward to everything coming on in the future. And I thank you guys so much for the opportunity.
Well, we're so thrilled to have you both. This will be a monthly series, the last Friday every month at 8 p.m. Eastern. Next month is going to be focused on women in aviation education. So we're going to have some A&P instructors, some technical trainers. It should be a good time, and I'm looking forward to seeing everyone then. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone, and have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Everyone.